This is the Wilwood 3/4 inch compact master cylinder, and the folks at Wilwood recommended that I buy one of these to operate the hydraulic clutch in my TR6060 transmission and clutch. And trying to get this little booger to operate the clutch was a 45-day long affair, and I just absolutely covered the entire internet trying to figure out why in the world I couldn't get my clutch to operate. The internet is absolutely loaded with people who are having similar problems like these, who are trying to bleed a hydraulic clutch on a TR6060 and get it working and so forth. And I ultimately figured it out and got it to work. And the way that I figured it out, the solution that I came to, is probably going to surprise you. It definitely surprised the folks at Wilwood. I spent a lot of time on the phone with Wilwood tech support. Those guys were great, and I really appreciate their time, but if I'm calling a spade here, they actually never suggested what turned out to be the actual solution. I came to that solution myself and figured it out, and since I seem to be the only guy on the internet that has figured it out, I want to make this video and share it with folks in the hope that everybody else in the future can take what was a 45-day affair for me and make it an afternoon event for you. So, we'll see. So I'm going to walk you through the process that I went through. Watch this entire video. Do not just watch the first 2 minutes and go, oh, okay, got it, and start ordering parts. Watch the whole damn thing if you're working on one of these things. If you don't, you're just going to waste your time and money. So the first thing that I did was I had to get my braided line to go from right here down to the transmission. So I bought that little booger right there, okay? That is a 3/8 by 24 inverted flare to a 4AN. You screw that little booger right there into the master, and that gives you a connection for a braided line, a 4AN line that then goes to the transmission. Now, when you take this thing to the transmission, obviously the connection at the transmission is a factory GM connection. You're not going to just hook up a 4AN line to it. So you're going to buy another adapter. At least that's what I did. I bought another adapter here that gets us from an O-ring connection to a 4AN connection. This goes into your transmission, and then you just have hose ends that connect the two right there with your little braided line. So that's how I started, by getting everything hooked up. Once I had my master cylinder in the car and I had the line running down to the transmission, I knew it had to be bench bled. And you can do this one of two ways. You can either use the little kit from Wilwood, or you can use your actual line that is running to the transmission. So I've got this one here just for the sake of, demonstration. So we take the line, we run it into our master here, with our master being completely full of fluid, and then what you then have to do is press on this thing and press it all of the way in. This is the super kicker here that you've got to make sure that you do. You have got to press on this thing all the way in so that you get all of the air out of the system. This can be kind of tricky, because if you make the mistake that I make and you put it in the car and you push on the pedal, if you don't have it adjusted to where you push this thing all the way in and the pedal stops, you may not ever realize that you're not pushing the plunger all the way in. You're leaving that last 1/2 inch on the table, and as a result, there's air inside of this thing. So that's really important when you go to bench bleed these things. You can either do this clamped right into the bench vise there, or you can do it in the car with the pedal. Just make sure that no matter what you do, that little plunger is being inserted all the way into it as you're trying to bench bleed it. Now, let me tell you something else. If you have your original, let's say that you have your braided line, okay, that's going in the car, and it's a 3-foot line, for instance, here, okay? Just pull this one out of the way. So you take one end of that line, you run it into the master, you take the other end of that line, you connect it right here. This is something that the folks at Wilwood never shared with me, and I learned this through talking to another mechanic friend of mine. He said, Ian, when you're bleeding this thing, press it a few times and hold it and leave it held. Don't let up on it. And he said the reason for that, he said, you may have air right down in here in the line, and it's going to take some time for that air to move through that line all the way up to the top. And so what you want to do is press it and hold it. Let that air move. If you just sit there and press it and you don't give it any time, you're not allowing time for those bubbles to move to the top of the line. So those are the two things that I want to share with you about bench bleeding one of these things. Make sure that you push that little plunger in all of the way, and if you're using a long line, you're not using one of these little clear lines, make sure that you give those bubbles time to move. So at this point, I know I now need to bleed the system. I start looking around underneath the car there where the line connects to the slave cylinder. I don't see a bleeder anywhere in sight. No such thing. I get online and discover that some of these transmissions don't have bleeders. So I'm like, okay, great, what do? I do some more searching and I find that I've got to pull a vacuum on the system to suck the air out of it. So what did I do? I ordered in a great big thick block of rubber that you see right there. I basically just put one of the little adapters from my vacuum pump right over the top of it, and then I used my vacuum pump that I've had for years, connect the line to it, started pulling a vacuum on the system. And at the end of the day, I pulled about a 27-inch vacuum on this thing, and it got some air out of the system, and it got the clutch working a little, but not working good to where it would actually fully release anything. So at this point, I know I'm going to SEMA in like a week. So I go to the Tremec booth at SEMA. I tell these guys what's going on, and unfortunately, they gave me two bad pieces of advice about their own transmission. Number one, they said a 27-inch vacuum to try and draw the air out of the system is not enough vacuum, and it's actually going to take more vacuum than that. And number two, they didn't actually tell me where to find the bleeder on that transmission. So at this point, I come back home, I order this vacuum pump that you see here off of Amazon, thinking that, this thing is hopefully going to be stronger. I get it in. It was not stronger. It actually had less vacuum than my old vacuum pump that you see right there. So at this point, I'm like, okay, I know I've got to have more vacuum. That's what the guys at Tremec are telling me. So I get online and I buy the Mighty Vac that you see right here. Pretty nice little vacuum system. Little metal construction, really nice vacuum pump, to be totally honest with you. I start pulling a vacuum on it. Again, I'm getting like 27, 28 inches of vacuum. The high-dollar pump right there is not doing any better. I'm not really drawing any more air out of the system. The damn clutch still doesn't work. So at this point, I try something different. I ordered up one of these little boogers that you see right here, and basically what it does is allow me to clamp right onto the top of the master cylinder and seals it off nice and tight to sit there and draw a vacuum on the master cylinder. I thought, well, maybe that rubber block that I was using is leaking, and as a result, I'm not getting as much vacuum as I should. I spend about $50 on this. I send the other vacuum pump back. Same problem. Everything is exactly the same. I don't know what's going on. At this point, I'm like, okay, good God, I need to start with something that I know, like in, mathematics, is a constant. What do I know that I can rely on? So I say, I need to perform some kind of a test to figure out for sure what works and what doesn't. So I came up with an idea. I ordered in a -4 plug that you see right there. And all I did was plug the line coming out of my master cylinder so that at that point, when I went to go push on the pedal, if the pedal was easy to push, well, then obviously this thing is junk and isn't working. But that's not what happened. This thing was working exactly as it was supposed to. I'd sit there and push on the pedal, and I couldn't push it but a 1/4 of an inch because it was obviously making tons of pressure, but the fluid couldn't go anywhere because I had plugged it up. So at that point, I said, okay, for sure, this thing actually works. So at this point, I'm like, good Lord, what do? I know my master cylinder works. I've done everything I could do sucking the air out of the lines using 3 different pumps, vacuum pumps, as per the guys at Tremec. So I go looking a little bit more. And the spot where the line actually connects to the transmission with that little adapter right there? If you'll watch this video for a second, you'll notice that as I wiggled the little connection right there, just a little bit of movement, the fluid would come out right there. So I'm like, holy moly, what is going on here? So I take that little video, I send it over to the folks at Aeroflow, and I said, man, your fitting right there, what's going on? It leaks a little bit. I don't know if this is my problem or not. And the folks over at Aeroflow promptly did dick. They didn't respond to my email or my video or anything. So this is not an endorsement of the folks at Aeroflow. Their fitting leaks. They will not respond to my email. Don't buy their products. Go get them somewhere else. While we're sitting here talking about ordering all of these different things, this is why this entire process took so long, because I'm ordering 3 vacuum pumps and adapters and fittings and more fittings and everything, and you name it. Every time that happens, the thing is on hold for 3 or 4 days while I'm waiting on something to show up. This is why it took a month and a half to try and get things working, was because I'm just constantly waiting on all this crap off of Amazon to show up. So at this point, I'm basically ready to go ahead and put insurance on the car and set the son of a bitch on fire. However, I got online and I was doing some reading and I finally found somebody on a forum that said, hey, this clutch and this transmission actually has a bleeder. The reason you don't know it's there is because it's actually on the top side of the transmission. It's not facing downward at all, so if you've got it inside the car and there's a transmission tunnel in the way, you're never going to see it. Now, thankfully, I'm friends with a guy named Stuart who runs Stuart Superior Transmission, and about a year and a half ago when I was making my transmission tunnel, he said, Ian, put yourself an access panel into this thing so that you can access other places on the transmission without actually having to pull the whole transmission out of the car. This would make our life in the transmission business so much easier if you do that. So I did that. And so the first thing I did when I read that this thing actually had a bleeder was I pulled that little panel off the car, peered down in there, and holy moly, I found a bleeder. So I call up my brother, he comes over, he starts pumping on the pedal, I reach in and start bleeding that thing. We did it several times, same way that you bleed a clutch, just hold the pedal, open the bleeder, let the fluid come out, close the bleeder, repeat. We did that to the point where we were confident that we'd gotten all of the air out of the system, and at that point, we were excited to go ahead and see if we finally got this thing working. We pushed the pedal in, and we could feel a significant amount of clutch pedal pressure, so we're like, okay, let's see what happens. We fire the car up in first gear with the clutch all the way in, and so help me God, the rear tires are still fucking spinning. So at this point, I did what any good mechanical engineer / shade tree mechanic would do in this situation. I got in my hot tub with a shitload of beer and got good and drunk. And while sitting in the hot tub, I started thinking to myself, you know, Ian, this is so odd. We got all the air out of the system, we got clutch pedal pressure, and it's not disengaging the clutch. And that's when I thought to myself, you know what? I just wonder if perhaps maybe this little booger right here is not moving enough volumetric fluid. So I get online, I find on Wilwood's website, the thing moves 0.55 cubic inches of fluid. And I start doing searches to see if they have anything that moves more fluid. And that's where things start to get really fun. I start finding that they do, in fact, have a high-capacity clutch master cylinder. They make one in a 7/8 and a 1-inch bore. That one there is the 7/8 bore, and it moves 0.55 cubic inches of fluid, which is over 50% more fluid. So what did I do? I ordered that thing, put it on the car, bench bled it, and then bled it down at the little bleeder, and it actually works. So at the end of the day, it wasn't that I couldn't get the air out of the system, it was that the system was the problem. I just wasn't moving enough fluid. Now, that big master cylinder that you saw there comes in a 7/8 and a 1-inch bore. I went with the 7/8 to see if that would work. I figured if it doesn't, Amazon has free returns. I'll send it back with the 1-inch. I didn't want to go straight to the 1-inch because I didn't want that to result in having a clutch pedal that had very little movement to it and as a result, very little feel. So it works, and I'll prove it. I really hope that this video helps some folks out there. If I had seen this video a month and a half ago, it would have helped me tremendously, but obviously it doesn't work that way. If you're finding this video for the first time, I hope I've earned your subscribe. And anybody that's made it this far in the video, if you got questions, ask them below in the comments. I will answer your questions in the comments. Click the thumbs up, like, subscribe, all of that stuff. Hopefully this video saves a lot of trouble. You guys have a great Sunday. Be good.